Why did African Americans come to these little towns back in the mountains?
Most black folks who were living in those coal towns, working as miners, were not born or raised there. And the majority of those men were recruited from Alabama. And that was for a very specific reason, because there were coal mines in Alabama. And many of the companies that were setting up shop in Harlan County owned mines in Alabama, so they knew exactly where to get the labor. They also knew that most of the black coal mining labor in Alabama was being sourced from convict leasing.
Because of very racist behaviors, blacks were often rounded up and falsely imprisoned, put on chain gangs, and then rented out for the sheriff's profit as labor.
So it was very easy and attractive to lure potential laborers to migrate to eastern Kentucky. It's the early 1900s. Alabama was a wretched environment in terms of just racial violence. So it wasn't just easy to get up and decide to migrate. So the companies sent labor agents to go get men. For example, in Lynch, there was this guy named Limehouse. White guy, they say that he was skinny and he used to wear a straw hat. He drove a truck that carried watermelon and sugarcane and corn, things like that, and men. And he would smuggle black men from Alabama, sometimes in the middle of the night, and bring them to Lynch. Once they'd work off whatever agreement they had with Limehouse, Limehouse would then agree to go back and get their wives and their children. So that's how many of the early families got there.
Well, in '41, my dad was working at steel mills, pipe shop in Birmingham for U.S. Steel, and he left there and come up here to work in the mines. And later on, he brought his family up there. He had a wife and 3 kids, and so we came up here when I was 13 years old. It was long. In a car on old narrow roads, 35, 40 miles an hour. We left in the morning, Birmingham about 7, 8 o'clock, and got here about 9 or 10 at night. And drove into the city, well into Cumberland and Benham and Lynch, all of them combined, and all the lights and everything looked so pretty. Got up the next morning and looked out, couldn't see nothing but mountains. So I cried for about a week. I didn't like it.
I'm originally from Evarts, Kentucky. I live in Cleveland, Ohio now. It's a small coal mining area where my dad worked in the coal mines there. And my mother worked as a housekeeper. My dad, he was born in Georgia, and his family moved to Kentucky. And that's where he married my mother. My mother was from Pennington Gap, Virginia, and they had 8 children. And that's where we lived until like 1954. I went to an all-black school from kindergarten to the 8th grade. I went to Evarts Black School. My kids, they couldn't fathom a one-room schoolhouse. So one year we took our kids to Kentucky, and they saw the one-room schoolhouse. And my kids said, "This ain't nothing but a little box." But see, it wasn't that many children. You had one teacher taught 1 through the 8th grade. And after you got to high school in 9th grade, you went to Harlan. Roosevelt High School, that's where all the black kids from the different coal mining camps like Evarts, Verdia, High Splint, Clover Splint, all of those little small coal mining camps fed into one high school.
Well, this building that we're sitting in right now originally was the Lynch Colored School. This is where all the blacks went to this school, Lynch Colored School, and like I say, even Benham, Kentucky, their blacks went here.
See, U.S. Steel owned the school, they brought the teachers in, they built the building, and the kids didn't have anything else to do but go to school. They had a truant officer. They would come down to these schools and check the list of the ones that didn't show up. And about 8:30, 9 o'clock, they were at your house. checking on, see why the kids didn't go to school.
This building we're sitting in now, where I started first grade. Education was paramount. Our parents, our teachers, our clergy just insisted that we make education the number one issue in our lives.
My name is Edgar James Moss, and I was born and reared in Benham. I now live in Newington, Connecticut. I am one of 13 children born to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Green and Ina Moss, who were both born in Alabama, and I attended the East Benham School under the principalship of Mr. Joseph Alexander Matthews and his wife, Mrs. Ruth Matthews. And at that time, grades 1 through 6 were on the first floor of the building. Grades 7 through 12 were on the second floor of the building. I forget what it was. I did something, and Professor Matthews was going to kick me out of school. And I knew that that would not go over with Mr. Green Moss. So I begged and I pleaded with Fess, everybody called him Fess, not to kick me out of school. So every window in our school, I had to wash those windows inside and out to keep from being kicked out of school.
We're in Fleming, Kentucky, and this is the church, Corinth Baptist Church. Now, Elkhorn Coal Company, back in the early 20s, they built the whole camp, and they built a schoolhouse for the black kids. White school was at Neon, and the black school was here in Fleming. They had teachers, the first teachers were the nuns from over at Jenkins. They taught school here in this building. My mom, she was from Canton, Mississippi, and then they moved up to a place called Hayman, Kentucky. My granddad, he worked coal mines, and then when he started preaching, then he didn't work in the coal mines anymore. My dad came from Spring City, Tennessee. The way they did Elkhorn Coal Company, and they would have, if they had a black man working, and they'd see how good he could work, and then they'd ask him, have you got any brothers or cousins that might want to work? And if they said yeah, and they lived in Alabama or Mississippi, they'd get on the train and they'd go down there and recruit them, more or less, bring them back up here to work. Had a company store, you could get food and clothing, everything from the company store. And they'd had this, what they call script. My dad would work and my mom would go down to the company store. It's like credit. She would get stuff that would come out of his payday when he got paid. I remember he got his little finger, he got 2 fingers cut off. A buggy run across him and cut off 2 of his fingers. And he got maybe $200 for that. When people would see him and they'd ask him, Clarence, what happened to your fingers? My family ate them fingers off, he'd say, because what money he got went for the family, to take care of the family.
I'm from Lynch, Kentucky, coal mining area where we worked in the coal mine 30 years. I went in the coal mine in '68. Been a United Mine Worker. I was a mine inspector, and I worked in the mine doing all kind of jobs in the mine. And it wasn't no black, white, it was families going underground away from their loved ones, working together and getting back outside, and don't take no chances underground, because ain't nobody holding that top up but the good Lord. I was a roof boater for 17 or 18 years.
Everybody in Lynch belonged to UMWA that worked here. Everybody in Benham had their own another union, not the same. They were in Jenkins and Wheelwright and Piper and in Williamson, West Virginia, anywhere that they had the United Mine Workers, they had a lot of black coal miners. There's been a lot of people killed right there in in this park right out here, because they had to bring National Guards up here in 39 just to stop the war, shooting and killing each other, union and non-union. What I really liked about it then was in the 50s when the thing was segregated. And the Union of Mine Workers had a slogan like, mining is dangerous. No matter what color you are, we all work together, white and black. So you gotta depend on each other and you get along. So it was good. And then there wasn't no, the blacks got one pay scale and the white got another pay. They had one pay scale and that was it. And that was the good part about it, way back in the 50s and the 40s.
Initially, when they started to allow women to go in the coal mine, I kind of remember it was my mother, Ruthie Mae, Kay Francis, Evarts Thomas, my sister Drina Smith Thomas, Nita Chapman, Patsy Tinsley. It was a couple white women that went in. All of them went by my mother because she was checking out. Most of them did practically the same thing as the men. I know my sister, if I'm not mistaken, she drove a coal cart. I guess where you get the coal and bring it to the outside and they load it on the trucks and stuff like that. And they cut coal and chiseled and done just like the men.
Ezell Gerod Smith. I'm from Lynch, Kentucky, and now I live in Louisville, Kentucky. We've seen our dads, come in, from working in the mine and just be wore out and everything. And they would always tell us, don't go in the mine, because it kills you. And if you're gonna go in the mine, I'd rather kill you myself. But unfortunately, I did go in the mine for about 9 years and something. Luckily, I got out before I could understand what the slow death that they were referring to, black lung and arthritis and all, from being in the dampness, coldness, and breathing in the coal dust. I worked all 3 shifts. The mine ran 24 hours a day. I did everything there was in the mine except for be a boss. Then one day I was what they call pinning top, drilling the top of the mine where you cut the coal out, and then there's slate rock or stone rock. It's just rock. It's nothing you can use in the coal family. So we would have to pin boards or plates or put up timbers so you could advance. And one day just caved in and they pinned me into a piece of machinery. And I was in the hospital for, I can't remember if it was a month, and rehab for about 6 months. And when I went back, I had claustrophobic. You get to understand the sounds. In the mines, when you cut the coal out, and there's nothing there but like just a smooth top, let's say sand rock. You can hear it ripping like paper, or you can hear gas sometimes spewing, and then you can hear and see pieces of rock jagged just shooting down because of the weight, because you haven't put anything there to kind of brace it. There was a lot of rock falls, a lot of cave-ins, a lot of rib rolls, where the sides would just explode due to the weight.